Hello and welcome back to the channel. So recently, Treasure Vault just came out for PF2, and with it came a new set of complex crafting rules. These have stirred up a lot of discussion in the community about their efficacy, and as someone who really tried to make the old crafting rules work as well as I could, I figured I would give my 2 cents on the topic. But before we start, I think we should go over the already existing crafting rules that were here before Treasure Vault came out, before we start adding any of the new variant rules on top of them. So, crafting is a downtime activity which is covered by the crafting skill, which is intelligence-based. To craft an item, you need to meet a number of prerequisites. First, the item must be your level or lower, and if the item is 9th level or higher, you must be a master in crafting, and if it's 16th level or higher, you must be legendary. You need to have the formula for an item, which is effectively an instruction manual on how to actually make the item. You need to have an appropriate set of tools or a workshop, something like a blacksmith's forge if you're crafting a suit of armor. You must supply raw materials worth at least half the item's price, which in most cases means that you just need to pay half the item's price in gold up front. And finally, you need to have any appropriate prerequisites listed by the item, including certain prerequisite feats, such as alchemical crafting to craft alchemical items, and magical crafting to craft magical items. After you meet the prerequisites, you must spend 4 days at work, after which you roll a crafting check. The DC is set by the GM, but is generally the DC by level of the item that you are trying to create. If you succeed, you have successfully created the item and can choose to either pay the other half of the item's cost upfront to finish the item immediately, or spend additional days working to continue to reduce the price of the item. Each additional day you work reduces the price of the item as if you are earning income based on your proficiency rank in crafting and your full level. If you fail the craft check, nothing happens, and you must reinvest that initial 4 days to try again. But if you critically fail, then not only do you fail to complete the item, but you also ruin 10% of the raw materials and have to repurchase that before you can start again. So, let's say as an example you wanted to craft a suit of full plate. This is a level 2 item which costs 30 gold, but is not alchemical or magical, so the only prerequisites you need are to be level 2 yourself, to have a formula for full plate, and have 15 gold worth of raw materials on hand. You would spend 4 days at work, at which point you make a check based on the DC by level for level 2 items, which, if we check the level-based DC table, is DC 16. Assuming you succeed that check, then you can either immediately pay another 15 gold to finish the full plate, or spend additional days working to reduce the price that you eventually have to pay. If you are also level 2 and trained in crafting, each additional day you work will reduce the price that you have to pay by 2 silver pieces. And if you manage to critically succeed that craft check by rolling 26 or above, you would reduce that price by 3 silver per day working. If you failed that check, you're still left with that initial 15 gold of raw materials, so you can start again, but you would have to spend another 4 days. If you critically fail the check, however, then 10% of the material is lost, so 3 gold worth of raw materials has been ruined by your attempt, and you would have to repurchase that before trying to craft that full plate armor again. There are a number of steps to calculate when determining what it takes to craft an item, so I've created this handy spreadsheet to kind of easily calculate and summarize all the information that you would need. So to use the spreadsheet, you need to know a few things. First of all, max investment, max without key ability score, and secondary are 3 different levels of crafting investment that I am assuming when calculating these values. So in max investment assumes you're an intelligence-based class that starts with an 18 int and boosts int at every opportunity. Additionally, it also assumes that you are getting an intelligence apex item, that you boost your crafting proficiency as early as possible, and that you're getting item bonuses to your crafting as early as possible. Of course, when you get items can vary from campaign to campaign, so to keep it consistent, I am assuming that you're following the automatic bonus progression table. So, as an example, on max investment, at level 3, your skill potency would increase your crafting bonus by +1. Max without key ability score assumes you're playing a class that does not have int as its key ability score, so you only swing with 16 int, and you are no longer getting an intelligence apex item. However, you are still boosting int at every opportunity, as long as it makes sense, and you are boosting your crafting proficiency and getting those item bonuses to crafting as soon as possible. And finally, secondary assumes that you are starting with a 14 in intelligence, that you boost it at every opportunity up to a maximum of 18, and that you boost your crafting proficiency and get those item bonuses as a secondary priority. So you don't go to expert at level 3, but rather go to expert level 5. And in addition, instead of getting the skill potency again at level 3, you would get that skill potency +1 at level 6 as per the automatic bonus progression table. These 3 categories are meant to represent 3 different ways a player might try to create a crafter in the game. Max investment is obviously if you're playing something like an alchemist and want to make crafting your whole shtick in game. Max without key ability score is if you want to play some class without a key ability score in intelligence, but still want crafting to be a main part of your character. Something like if you're playing an intelligent champion who wants to forge their own armor. And secondary is obviously if you want crafting to be important and relevant, but don't want it to be the primary thing you're focused in. Maybe you're a fighter who's focused mostly on athletics and grabbing your opponents, but still want to be able to craft some consumables for yourself and your party in downtime. So now, this part of the sheet represents your percent chance of success based on your level and the item level of rolling a success on a crafting check. And down here we have the chance to roll a critical success. So let's say you're level 1 trying to craft a level item. At max investment, you would have a 65% chance of success, going down to 55% if you're only secondary investing in crafting. I'm not accounting for natural 20s or natural 1s in this calculation. I'm assuming that if you need a nat 20 to succeed, you probably aren't going to try to craft the item, and if you need a nat 1 to fail, the chance is pretty negligible, such as to be not really worth including in the calculations. And over here we have the amount of money you save by crafting an item over just purchasing the item wholesale after X days. This does include the initial 4 days to set up the crafting of the item. So, with 5 days spent, you have 4 days of setup and 1 day of reducing investment. This only shows how much you save on a success. However, if you want to see how much you save on a critical success, you need to just move to the next column. So for example, we're level 1 crafting level 1 item. On a success, after 5 days, we have saved 0.2 gold. If we critically succeed, we instead save 0.3 gold. So going back to our full plate example, it's a level 2 item, so we're going to put level 2 in this box. And if we're level 2 ourselves, from max to secondary, we have a 65% chance, 60%, 55% chance to succeed that crafting check. And to critically succeed, not counting the natural 20, we have 15%, 10%, and 5% respectively. If we only spent 5 days working on that full plate, we would normally save 2 silver. However, if we wanted to work off the entire 15 gold remainder, on a normal success, we would have to spend 79 days working on that full plate. And if we managed to hit that 15% critically succeed with max investment, we would have to spend 54 days working to reduce the price of that full plate down to half. You might think that's an obscenely long time to work to reduce the price of full plate down to half. And I would agree with you. which is where we come into the goals of the basic crafting system for PF2. Now I will say I don't have any words from the developers of PF2 on their goals for the crafting system, so most of this is going to be my own conjecture. However, we can observe a few things. First is that crafting takes a long time. As we just saw, reducing an odd-level item down to half price is a very long endeavor, even if you critically succeed your crafting check. 2. You can also observe that it is strictly worse to craft an item, assuming you can just earn income at your level. Because crafting is based on your earning income, but requires that 4 days of setup where you earn 0 money. If you had just spent that 4 days also earning income instead, you would be 4 days worth of earned income richer than if you had crafted the item. And 3. To craft anything, you need to have a formula for the item in question. What this means is you can't just craft whatever you feel like willy-nilly. You still have to find that initial formula in order to gain access to crafting that item. So what does this tell us about Paizo's expectations for crafters? Well, it says to me that the expectation is that 1. The campaign has regular and somewhat significant lengths of downtime, and 2. That you are consistently engaging in settlements that are lower than your level, so that you can't just go out and purchase items on level or even earn income at your level, such that it is not only profitable but necessary to craft the items that you want for yourself. Now you may say, wait a minute, how are you meant to find formulas which are items of your level if you can't find items of your level in general? I think that restriction is mostly there so GMs can still control what loot you get. I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that it's easier to find an instruction manual on how to create a flying broom than it is to find an actual factual flying broom lying around in a dungeon somewhere or in some random shop in a town somewhere. Now, of course, this system leaves much to be desired, and I think a lot of the complaints that people have with the crafting system as it is at base come from the campaign expectations that Paizo puts on. For one, not every campaign is going to have downtime, or even significant lengths of downtime. Downtime is often an overlooked part of TTRPGs, and PF2, while it does have support for downtime activities, doesn't actually emphasize downtime all that much. You can pretty easily run a campaign where there is absolutely no downtime and not miss out on a lot of the system. Additionally, a lot of campaign premises don't leave a lot of room for downtime. If an archlich is raising a horde of undead and threatening to take over the world, the party isn't very likely to spend 2 months off resting and repairing. They're much more liable to just rush in there, run through that horde of undead, and try and defeat the archlich as soon as possible. And the second assumption is actually, I think, the more egregious one for basic crafting. Downtime, while it isn't super emphasized, is certainly easy to make happen and work around, especially if someone's investing in crafting. However, the assumption that the settlement level you're working at is oftentimes lower than your PC's level is very rarely enforced in my experience. The problem with enforcing settlement level is that it punishes the other player rather than rewards the crafter. Let's compare with just adding downtime. With added downtime, you're rewarding your crafting player for investing in crafting because now they can use their craft skill. But if other players don't want to invest so much in downtime, they can just earn income normally or even ignore the system entirely. Ultimately, it's their choice whether or not they want to engage with the system. However, with enforcing settlement levels, now suddenly the other players who were excited to purchase their magic items, or even their fundamental runes which the game assumes you have, are now forced to engage with the lower settlement levels. Either they have to go run off to somewhere that has a high level shop so that they can actually purchase magic items, or they must rely on the crafter to do crafting for the entire party, because suddenly now no one is able to purchase magic items. But even if the purchase of on-level magic items are restricted, the level of earned income tasks are even more rarely restricted in my personal experience. Oftentimes, if a high-level PC wants to earn income in a PF2 game, they'll just earn income at their level, representing their skill and expertise, and being compensated for that skill accordingly. What all this comes down to is that the basic crafting rules are only really suitable for a very narrow set of games, one in which there is significant downtime and settlement level is heavily enforced by the GM. Of course, the new complex crafting rules in Treasure Vault attempt to address this somewhat, so let's see what they are and how they do. So, complex crafting by default has most of the same rules as basic crafting. All the prereqs are the same, where you have to provide half the gold up front, you need the formula, item needs to be of your level lower, etc., etc. However, the first difference comes in setup time, where instead of a flat 4 days, we have this table based on whether the item is consumable or permanent, and the item's relevant level to yours. So, an on-level consumable still takes 4 days to set up, and a consumable your level minus 3 or lower takes 2 days to set up. An on-level permanent takes 6 days, and a permanent of your level minus 3 or lower takes only 4 days to set up. Now here's where the first major difference comes in, which is that you can rush the setup time with the complex crafting rules. If you're an expert, master, or legendary crafting, you can rush the setup time by 1, 2, or 3 days, and increase the DC by 5, 10, or 15 respectively. And if you reduce the craft time to 0 or less days, it instead takes 4 hours. So for example, if you're a legendary crafter and you rush a low-level item by 3 full days, you set up that item in 4 hours, meaning you can craft it in less than a day, and I would argue in the middle of an adventuring day. In addition to rushing the setup process, you can also rush the finishing process of an item. Instead of reducing the price of the item by the earned income table, you can reduce the price of the item by double the value instead. However, if you choose to rush the finishing process, once the item creation is complete, you must attempt a flat check equal to 10 plus the item's level minus your crafting proficiency bonus, which is your level plus 2, 4, 6, or 8, depending on if you are trained, expert, master, or legendary in crafting. If you succeed the flat check, the craft is performed normally. If you fail the flat check, the item is completed but gains a quirk, which is a relatively harmless but kind of funky effect of an item. It's only on a crit failure where things go poorly, and the item is ruined or might become a cursed item instead. However, because of the way that the DC is set up, you only crit fail on a natural 1 on the die roll, meaning that so long as you don't roll a natural 1, you are guaranteed to have a functional item, if a bit odd or different from normal crafted items of its type. So the rules for complex crafting are obviously a little more complex than the basic crafting rules. So I've created a second spreadsheet which calculates the same information you would get from the default crafting spreadsheet, but for the complex crafting rules. So let's say you just reached level 10 and you want to help out your champion by crafting a moderate sturdy shield. This is a level 10 item that costs 1000 GP. It is magical, so you will need magical crafting, 500 gold up front, and the formula for a moderate sturdy shield before you can begin. Once you have that, we can plug all the information into the spreadsheet, which works pretty similarly to the default crafting spreadsheet. We have our item level here, which in this case is level 10, and we are level 10 ourselves. Let's say we're doing max without key ability score investment, so we have an 80% chance to succeed the craft check, assuming we spend no days rushing the item. Let's say we succeed and spend 10 total days crafting the item. So we can see at level 10, crafting a level 10 item takes 6 days of setup time. So, assuming we succeed, we spend 10 days total, we save 24 gold by crafting the item. Now if we go back to our default spreadsheet and plug in the same numbers, level 10 sturdy shield, spending 10 days crafting, we can see that we actually save 36 gold with the default crafting rules. So the complex crafting rules actually cost us money in this scenario. However, that's because we didn't take advantage of any of the additional bonuses that complex crafting gave us, which is, of course, the rushing ability. So let's say we want to spend 1 day rushing the setup time of our sturdy shield. That brings our success chance down to 55%. However, just that 1 day spent saves us an extra 6 GP on the back half, meaning we save a total of 30 gold now by rushing a single day. And if we also rush the finishing process, we double the amount we save all the way up to 60 GP. Of course, we're going to have to make that flat check to ensure that we don't accidentally ruin the item that we're creating. However, in this case, it's only a DC of 4, so that means most of the time we're going to be able to craft that sturdy shield without any issues. On a 2 or 3, the sturdy shield gains a minor quirk, and only on a natural 1 do we accidentally ruin or curse the sturdy shield that we are creating. Overall, what this means is that although it takes a little bit more investment on the front half to craft with the complex crafting system, it becomes much more worthwhile to spend extra days reducing the price of the item you're crafting on the back half. Meaning that if you have extended periods of downtime in your campaign, suddenly not only is complex crafting better than earned income, but it's actually a significant chunk better than earned income than in a standard crafting campaign. And finally, there's one last thing I want to cover about the new complex crafting rules. That's related to this box, Quick Setup. Quick Setup is a new, rare skill feat meant to be used with the complex crafting variant rules. And what this basically means is that your setup time for very low-level consumables and permanents are reduced even lower than they already are. Additionally, if you reduce the setup time of a consumable 6 levels lower than you to less than a day, you can instead set them up in 2 hours. And if you reduce the setup of a permanent item 6 levels lower than you to less than a day, it happens in 4 hours. Now there's a little weirdness where it says here you can instead set them up in just 2 hours, allowing you to do so during an adventuring day, which seems to imply that 4 hours is not short enough to set up an craft item during an adventuring day. However, I would argue that 4 hours is still short enough that you could do so in one adventuring day, so long as you aren't adventuring basically from sunup to sundown, as so long as you can finish at a reasonable time and set up camp, spend 4 hours before you go to bed, or during night watch, or even 2 hours before and 2 hours afterward to set up that craft time and get that crafting done in the middle of the adventuring day. So, what do these complex crafting rules really change? Well, going back to the 2 goals that I see in the original crafting rules, that being the assumption of lots of downtime and the assumption of heavily enforced settlement levels, complex crafting pretty clearly doesn't do much for the lots of downtime assumption. In fact, having more downtime is more beneficial to complex crafting because it's let you rush the finishing process for longer. However, the second assumption, where settlement level is heavily enforced, is significantly altered in the complex crafting rules. Now, not only is complex crafting not strictly worse than earning income, but after a certain amount of downtime, it is actually significantly better than earning income even at your level. What this means is that now you can create a crafting-focused character and work with your GM to incorporate a lot of downtime into the campaign, without also feeling like you're screwing over the other players by also forcing them to incorporate these settlement level restrictions. Your other players who aren't maybe as interested in the crafting system can still earn income normally and buy items from item shops as they normally would, but you, because you wanted to focus into crafting, now actually have a benefit to investing in crafting and making your own magical items. Now, this is, of course, far away from the PF1 days, where having a crafter is almost mandatory because of the amount of money they could save you as a party, but it is still nice to actually have a reason to invest in crafting in a campaign that isn't so heavily restricted by the basic crafting assumptions. Now, there are, of course, complaints about the complex crafting system, and most of them, at least from the ones I've seen, seem to revolve around the fact that the complex crafting didn't do anything for the first assumption, the assumption that you really need a lot of downtime in a campaign for complex crafting to function. So first off, I would like to point out that complex crafting does in fact do something for those types of campaigns, namely by rushing the setup process. Especially with quick setup, but even at default, if you rush a consumable down to 0 days, you can set it up in 4 hours or less, allowing you to do so while traveling or in the middle of an adventuring day, meaning you don't have to take dedicated downtime anymore, at least while crafting low-level consumables. Low-level consumables are really, I think, the biggest winner when it comes to the new complex crafting rules. Beforehand, if you had a low-level consumable that you wanted to craft, you would have to spend those 4 days doing setup and an extra day reducing its price to half cost if you wanted to do that. Meaning that no matter what, no matter how high level you were, you would always take 5 days to craft items at half price. Now, once you're through 4 levels above the item you want to craft, by default, you only need 2 days of setup to actually create the item. And because the item is low level, it's going to be pretty easy to make that rush check to reduce that setup time even more down to at a minimum of 4 hours. Meaning that you can spend 4 hours setting up the item and then spend the rest of the day working to reduce the price of the item to half. So in one day, you can pretty easily crank out half price consumables so long as they're fairly low level in comparison to yours. Obviously, this doesn't do anything for on-level consumable and permanent items, or even let you save money by crafting because you can't spend downtime performing the finishing process to reduce the cost. However, I think this is pretty intentional, and honestly a good call on Paizo's part. As much as I would love to be able to play a crafter character who's able to literally craft everything that they want in a system as finely balanced as PF2, if it were able to support something like that, it's pretty easy for the pendulum to swing around the other way and suddenly make crafting an integral part of every adventuring party, such that everyone is essentially forced to have a crafter in order to keep up with the expected progression of the game. I think what the complex crafting rules provide, which is a crafting system which is valuable and workable, and yet not overpowering to the rest of the party, is I think a good place for the PF2 system to be. Now, obviously I'm not a game designer. I'm sure there are places where it might be improved, and if we spent a long time thinking about it, we might get there eventually. But as a step up from the basic crafting system, I think complex crafting is a really good, solid set of rules for use in a game. So those are my thoughts on complex crafting and the craft system as a whole in PF2. I hope you found them at least somewhat interesting, and if you want access to the crafting spreadsheet that I showed off in the video, I'll leave a link to it in the description. If you want to use it yourself, you will have to create a copy of it so that you can edit it, but otherwise it should be pretty straightforward to use. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you'll come back in a couple of weeks to see what I have coming up next. But most of all, I hope you have a lovely day.